Okay, do I have your permission to record?
Yes.
Okay. So welcome today to everybody listening in. On the phone, we are doing an interview with R Shawn McBride. He is a lawyer that's able to practice in 12 different states in America. That's at least one-fifth of the country, including many southern states and California. And he also gave a TED Talk on women in business. Recently, he did an interview or an essay on Medium where he talked about, I believe it's the California gig economy rule, and how that may shape law across America because there's a traditional history of other states in America following legal precedent in California. Sir, did I get that right? Or did I missummarize anything?
Yeah, I think it's a fair summary. I think all the states learn from each other. I think one of the things I mentioned in the article was that California has traditionally been a test ground for a lot of things, and some of them do get adopted. And we'll talk specifically about what I think is unique about the gig economy rule and why I think what California has done there is probably going to lead some action in some other states. So we can dive into what's special about this particular rule as we get into the chat here.
Yes, to quote from the Medium article, and if I'm saying anything wrong, please correct me. So it's not surprising California was litigating this issue. What is surprising is that the Supreme Court jumped in to make a new test for classification and make things easier for the state. I would not be surprised at all in the courts of Florida or Texas or other states if they start using the slam dunk cases that California will likely be winning in the near future to help their cases back home. Is that
I think that's a very fair statement. I think one of the things we're going to see here with this gig economy rule is all the states have a very, very high incentive to get people classified as employees because that allows them, of course, to collect the unemployment taxes. Many states that gives them a cleaner route to get income taxes. So states generally want people classified as employees, and if you look at the litigation, if you don't see states suing people to say people are independent contractors. It's always going the other direction. And I think what's interesting here with the California gig economy rule is, of course, you had a Supreme Court ruling, which then the state legislature in turn took and turned into a law, so that made it even stronger from a legal standpoint, right? More easy to enforce, more easy for the state to win cases. And I think because all the other states have an incentive to classify people as employees versus independent contractors, what I expect is a lot of states are going to look back to California and say, oh, they just won that case. Even though the law is different, they're going to use that to make arguments in their cases because states tend to look at other states' cases if there aren't cases directly on point in the state and say, hey, more people should be employees, not independent contractors.
so? It's likely that what California did is codify or make legal an opinion that many states feel.
Right. I think that's right. A lot of states want this. I'm not aware of any other state that has a law that's as strong as what California's law is for classification of employees. And I think everybody else is going to start looking at that and say, hey, look at that case in California. That person was classified as an employee. Yeah, we have different law here in Florida. We have different law in Texas. But, look at the court's reasoning, and I think it's going to move the needle towards more people being classified as employees versus independent contractors throughout the country.
Okay, okay. Well, what I'd like to ask you is, as a lawyer who's been practicing for a long time and has the ability to practice in many states across America, one of the things you said in your Medium article was uh, when you were in law school, sitting at classes at the University of Maryland, we'd read cases from all over the U.S. and sometimes the world. And you'd start to notice one thing. California's laws and rulings were often very different than other places.
Yep.
Has California historically been a legal trend center in America in comparison to other states? And how long has that gone on?
It's been going on, I would say, a lot of the modern era, probably at least the last 100 years. And as you look at the cases, what you see is California tends to test new laws and they tend to have a different public policy than the other states. I don't think there's any surprise there, right? So California is a lot more protective of individuals versus companies, and so you'll see a lot of rulings with kind of that spirit to them. And we kind of knew when we started looking at cases that a lot of times when you're in a case book where they take a selected reading of different cases from around the country on a topic, if you're working through an employment law issue, you would see that usually, or torts or contracts or whatever, that California was usually a little bit different, probably a little more pro-individual than other states. So you just kind of knew that California just had a different laws, but also just a different court view. You would just see it throughout the cases, and usually if you had 3 or 4 cases on a similar topic, California would often be the one that would be different than the other
Yeah,
3.
yeah. So California's been a trendsetter. It's been pushing progressive ideas. It's been making them get into law. And that allows many other states and the federal government to look at the laws that California is making and say, here's how we could do it. So California has been a force for America moving in a progressive direction over the last couple of decades. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's definitely the statement. I think the courts have done it, and then, of course, every state has their own agenda, and they look to what they want to look to. But if somebody in another state's trying to move a progressive direction, they might look to a California case or ruling that's in their favor and then, try to push that into their state. So it definitely, is, there's a very interesting balancing in the U.S., as you know, between the political parties and the different ideologies, and California definitely has a strong influence on what the rest of the country is doing.
So now is the part where I got to ask you the controversial question that we talked about in email. So we've established for everybody listening in, California's been able to try new laws, experiment, and move the country in a progressive era. What happens when the Ninth Circuit Court, which is the federal circuit court that oversees California, becomes all conservative and starts shooting down California laws pretty much at birth?
It's interesting. I've been noodling on that question since we started talking about it, and I looked at a couple of the articles you forwarded me. And what's interesting, and I think the professor that was on one of the other tapes you had sent to me raised the point. Both the conservatives are often in favor of states' rights, and so it will be a very interesting test to see how true to the ideology the judges can stick if we get to that point, right? So if we get to the point where, Ninth Circuit has a conservative majority, do they stick to their roots and philosophical tenets and say, yes, we want states to have individual rights and the power to make laws and to kind of be the laboratory that some of the founders envisioned, right? That the 50 states or 13 colonies at the time would be these laboratories where they would test different things, and then, what we have seen with California up till now is California tests things, and sometimes people say, hey, that's working, we want that in our state. Will the judges allow that to happen, or will they bring their personal ideology in there and, start, finding reasons to invalidate laws or to make a stronger federal government? I think it'll be a very interesting test, because kind of we have the saying in the law that hard cases make bad law, which, for those that aren't initiated to it, basically, a lot of times judges get facts where you want somebody to win because it's sympathetic, right? You know you want that outcome. So then they bend the law, and then what happens is that law then becomes precedent and then gets repeated in case after case after case. So hard cases often lead to laws that have bad outcomes or don't work for everybody else. I could see the same type of thing here, which is this theoretical conservative majority in the Ninth Circuit. Would they have the strength to say, yes, we want states to have rights because that's what we want in other parts of the country? Or would they come up with excuses to modify or change the California law based on the facts they're seeing? It's something I don't know if we can predict. We'd have to really see how it plays out in reality.
given that, so it is a reality that the Ninth Circuit Court, which is the court that reviews all California laws and can strike them down or say that they're legal and is based upon those decisions can go to the Supreme Court, it's shifting. It's been very liberal since, according to the LA Times, in an article December last month, Trump having his revenge on California as he remakes once liberal Ninth Circuit. They're saying that this court has been largely liberal for 40 years, since the late 70s, and almost half of the judges now, for the first time in 4 decades, are conservative, and that could dramatically overturn the way that court views things, and could have it shoot down laws. For example, we had the U.S. Supreme Court ruled recently that property owners can go directly to a federal court with claims that state and local regulations effectively deprive landowners of the use of their property. This was a 5-4 decision, and it overturned decades of precedent that barred property owners from going to federal court until their claims had been denied in state court. So California was trying to fight the Trump administration and say, you can't just sell off lands. If you want to, you have to go through us. And then they were also trying to fight against individual property owners from doing the same. The Supreme Court slammed them and said, you don't have to go to California court. You can go right to us and skip them. That was a major precedent overturning, and it really weakens California's ability to be able to protect their land. Is this the kind of thing that could happen with a dominant conservative Ninth Circuit court? California comes up with progressive laws, and they're just, nope, you don't get to do that. And this era that's almost half a century old of California pursuing progressive legislation effectively is killed. I mean, is that a real possibility for the future, or is this just hyperbole?
No, I think it's more than hyperbole. I think it's definitely a possibility. And I think it's one of those deals where, until you see it in action, we're not going to know. I mean, will these judges, stick to constitutional construction principles that are pro-strong 10th Amendment that say, hey, states have rights, we're getting out of the way, we want the states to be able to do what they want to do? Or are they going to then reverse roles, right? I mean, now you're talking about, judges that typically don't do this. Do they become pro-commerce clause, and do they, try to push it down on the states? I think it's very hard to predict, right? I mean, we're talking about change of balance, and when you change balance, it's hard to know in advance exactly what's going to happen. I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I think it's more than just, drum beating or building a mountain out of a molehill. I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on, and it's definitely a real possibility.
How much faith should Californians have that these new federal appointees, who are appointed by Donald Trump and a Senate that has essentially sworn allegiance to him, with statements such as he's going to be acquitted no matter what happens in an impeachment trial, with all the senators essentially backing that up? So you got Trump, he's biased. You got the Senate saying they're going to acquit Trump no matter what before they even get there. That shows a certain level of bias. These two institutions get to approve all of the federal court judges. So how do we know that Trump and the Senate aren't approving ideologues who will do whatever Trump says because that's what it takes to get the appointment? Or again, is this just hyperbole?
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely, and I think Mitch McConnell's been very clear about he wants to fill judicial vacancies, and he wants to make it happen, right? And that's, there was an article that came out, not many people were talking about it, but while the impeachment vote was happening in the House and the whole country was watching around, he was filling judicial vacancies over in the Senate, right?
Yep.
So, definitely it is a clear agenda, and you definitely, there's no surprise to it. It's one thing people talk about during the presidential election. One of the powers of the president is to fill judicial vacancies. Usually the spotlight's on the Supreme Court, but it happens throughout the federal judiciary. So there's no doubt that there's a push to get more judges that are ideologically aligned with the current administration, right? So they're definitely making that effort, and They kind of doubled down on it with Mitch McConnell getting on it. I'm not used to a Senate leader being as strong about it as what he is. This is usually lower on the priority stack. But this time around, we've got somebody in the Senate who's got this very high on his priority stack to get the judiciary set a certain way. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of judges come through. Historic numbers of appointments and approvals. So it's happening. Again, the question becomes at the end of the day, when these judges are put in place and they have real live cases and have to make decisions, do they stick to their principles that they espouse, supposedly, or do they look at the facts and go for the outcome they think they want? And that, is always hard to predict.
And just to be clear, when you're a judge and you want to get appointed and they're talking about appointing you and they ask you some questions and you say, oh, I view this legal issue this way. After you become a judge, if you suddenly change your mind on the way you see the law, there's no punishment for that, right? They can't just go, well, you said that you looked at immigration this way and now you're a judge, you're changing your mind, so you are removed from judgeship. That doesn't happen, correct?
No, these are well, it depends on the court, but I mean, the Supreme Court certainly and a lot of the federal judiciary are lifetime appointments, right? So these people are in. You're not pulling them back out. So, barring an impeachment, right? These judges theoretically could be impeached. But they're in, and we do see that. I mean, there's been historic cases where Supreme Court justices have come up different than what originally was anticipated, right? So they have a history of decisions, but then when they get their judicial appointment and they get appointed to the Supreme Court, they change their outcomes different than was expected. So that is a very real possibility, right? There's no real check barring misconduct that would rise to a level of impeachment. Just the judge's decisions, the way the system was set up, they're made not to be questionable, right? That was kind of the independence the founders envisioned, is that these judges sitting on these federal courts would not have to run for election. They would not have to answer on the whims of political ideologies as they go back and forth, but they kind of have this independence. So, yeah, there is no guarantee, right? So somebody that, they look at their case history, they look at the rulings they've made in the past, that's all part of the vetting process. They ask them questions. But if a judge goes a different direction after they're vetted, you're absolutely right. There's no real control on it,
So I have to ask these questions in stages because I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a law background, but I think I understand what's happening here, and I need somebody who's an actual expert to say, yes, it is actually possible that Donald Trump and the Senate, that's basically shown their bias to him, could appoint a bunch of federal judges who behind the scenes are saying, oh, I love everything Trump's about. Now, publicly they go, I will uphold the law and I believe in Constitution and fairness, but they don't actually have to do that when they're judge. We could have a series of conservative appointees who are hardcore ideologues, nobody would ever know, and they would be in charge of approving or shooting down California laws till they're basically dead, because these are lifetime appointments. Am I summarizing this? This is a fair possibility. Is that correct?
Yeah. And then, in the federal courts, you see a lesser version of what we see in the Supreme Court, which is people tend to hang around until somebody of their same ideology is ready to replace them, right? So sometimes we'll see Supreme Court justices, step down when they think the right ideology is in the Oval Office, so they can keep the balance the way it is. And I think you can see some extent of that too. That's why these they tend to hold out for a long time, these judicial currents, right? So if you get a current going a certain direction, it tends to stay that direction for a long time, number of decades, until just, in some cases people start aging out, right? People hold on to the bench as long as they can, and they just die, and then they have to be replaced, or they get ill and they have to be replaced. So these are very long-term decisions, People tend to hold these seats for long periods of time.
So if Trump and the Senate approve judges who are, say, in their 40s or 50s,
yeah,
and then let's say...
And there's a reason why you'll see that a lot of times is these judicial, even Supreme Courts will reach Supreme Court appointments reaching to people in their 40s and 50s, and I think there's a known thing behind the scenes, which is, put somebody in a little bit younger, maybe, because, they're going to probably last longer.
So even if, let's say hypothetically, tomorrow, Trump is fully impeached and he's removed, because here in California, that's all we talk about. That's what everybody's talking about. That's what they want. I don't think it's going to happen, but let's say it does. And this is my test for fellow liberals, because I'm a progressive, but I go, hey, folks, that's not the way the system works. I don't care if Rachel Maddow said it. That's not the way it works. So Trump's gone, bad orange man gone. The Senate is still there. And according to Norman Ornstein and other demographers, the Senate is projected to stay conservative till 2045 because of basically in 35 to 40 states in the Midwest, young people are leaving, immigrants are not moving in, minorities are moving out, people are moving to the large cities, they're not choosing to stay in rural areas, which means about 35 to 40 states are going to become, according to Norman Ornstein, who's a demographer, more white, old, rural, and conservative and male. And that's not going to change for another 20 years, which means the Senate, according to some, is projected to stay hardcore conservative. They are the exclusive gatekeeper of who gets to be a federal judge. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, that's the way the framers envisioned it. And there's a very interesting balance between, the House and the Senate and their responsibilities. And, back in the Constitutional Convention, a lot of time was spent on this. And I think, of course, I think it was hard for people 250 years ago to anticipate what, modern society would look like. But there was a lot of balance put on, the states versus, the population, right? And the Senate was originally, the senators were appointed by the state. We've changed that in constitutional amendments. But the Senate was built to be the protector of the states, and particularly the small states. And I think the framers knew that we would have small states against large states in the future. I don't think they anticipated what we have now with the vast difference in population. When you have states like Wyoming and Delaware with less than 1 million people, and California with whatever the current number is, 40 million-ish. That's a huge difference, And both of those bodies get, 2 senators. And I don't think back in 1776, with the low population the U.S. had then, that they could envision such vast differences in the populations of the states.
So we have a system where Trump's gone, the Senate's still conservative. Let's go crazy. Let's say Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, vice president, president, pick your chick, pick your which one you want. They get elected, they're president, the House loves them, and they're trying to get all these progressive justices through. A conservative Senate could basically block that forever, right? I mean, could it say the entire 8 years that Sanders is there, you don't get not even one judge that you want. We're going to keep all the conservative judges that we appointed when Trump was around, and we're not going to allow you to place any liberals on the court whatsoever. Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility, and, who knows with what we're seeing here in the modern world, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that were kind of, I think, viewed as being not possible or not within the realm of possibility when the Constitution was written that are happening, right? So a lot of these things were built to force consensus. This country, and one of my favorite books is a book called Cousins Wars, and it talks about how basically different ideological groups from Europe, particularly England, came to the U.S. and populated different parts of the U.S. and brought these ideological differences, right? So when the founders were forced to go into this constitutional convention, the 13 colonies really weren't that great of friends, right? They tolerated each other, but they all wanted to get rid of British rule. So they came together and they did what they had to do to get rid of the British. But in the process, they built a system with lots of these checks and balances, and this half of the government does this, and this part of the government does that, and you have to get the approval of this. And it was all designed to force people to compromise. The problem is the way we've seen it happen is it leads to things like government shutdowns, right? We don't agree, so now we have a bunch of people that are unemployed and can't pay their mortgages, right? Very unintended consequences. I don't think the founders thought about how deep some of these uh, fissures could get, and I think as we look forward, do we see a situation where we get so political that one party says, no, we're just not going to approve any of your appointees? It's possible, yeah. I mean, it's extreme. We haven't had that in the past. Up to, there's kind of the tradition of everybody cooperating with each other because they know the tables are going to turn again, and you want the other side to cooperate with you when the tables are turned the other way. But we're seeing more and more political division where people are saying, I don't care about the future. I don't care about these traditions. I just want what I want right now.
Yes. So,
it hasn't been tradition. It hasn't been what prior Senates have done. Maybe the Senate slows down a little bit on judicial appointments. Maybe they're not as aggressive about getting it done. Maybe a Supreme Court justice that comes up late in the term doesn't get pushed all the way through. These types of things have happened, but could we get deeper fissures? Could we get one party saying, "Hey, we're just not going to approve your appointees"? It's possible. I mean, it's extreme, but it's the direction we seem to be headed.
Hasn't been done before, but it could happen, where they just keep appointing conservative judges, they retain control of the Senate, and therefore block any liberal appointees. And California just has to deal with a circuit court above them that strikes down all of their progressive laws for decades. That's a possibility.
That's a possible scenario. Yes, that is one of the many. That's one of the many different outcomes as possible. But I can see that as a plausible possibility, right? I mean, so you get some conservative judges in there now. You start blocking liberal judges or progressive judges in the next administration, and the balance of power just shifts over time naturally as people leave the court, right, through death, illness, or just retirement or whatever. I can certainly see it moving that direction. That's definitely a possible scenario.
And to back up, again, we don't know how this goes, but you're talking about it's not exactly law the way that they appoint these judges. There was precedent, there was behavior, there was this is the way we always do it. And if that goes away, such as Trump removing the ability for senators to approve who's even proposed to be a federal judge in the area, as he did this year, I believe that was the first time ever in federal history where they didn't ask senators from the state if they approved of the federal nominees. That was a broken tradition. That happened this year.
Yeah.
Never happened before. They did it, and the Republicans let them do it. Nobody on the Republican Party said, which I agree with you, hey, don't do that because they'll do that against us in the future. Everybody was just, that's fine. So we have an entire party backing up a marked distance from tradition.
Yeah, and I think and both sides have departed from tradition, but I think it's a very important thing that we watch because the Constitution's only so long, right? I mean, if you go back and I've reviewed the Constitution, with respect to impeachment, because it's what everybody's thinking about right now. There's not a lot of language in the Constitution about the impeachment. Most of what got built was kind of added later based on tradition, right? And everybody kind of said, okay, well, the Constitution only went this far. Here's how we're going to handle it. And there was kind of just this understanding that, we'll just do what we did last time so that, because the Constitution is not that detailed on it. And same thing with these federal appointments. And you're right. There's a lot of people now going back and saying, well, Constitution doesn't say it directly. It's not spelled out. It's just been, policy or been what we've done for 100 or 200 years. We don't have to do it that way. And certainly from a pure construction of the Constitution point, that's true. But, from a stability of the country standpoint and, just knowing what to expect next, which is something I think about a lot as a business owner and a consultant is, what is next? I don't know because we're starting to throw away so much of just what we've known as kind of the understanding.
You had said something that grabbed me, and I felt the same thing too, but I don't say it out loud because in California, and I love this place, but
Yep.
we're kind of biased here. I love us, but we're kind of biased, you know. Everything Trump does is wrong. He does nothing right ever, every single time. Everything California does is right. Everything he does is wrong. And I'm like, come on. I don't like him either, but everything he does is bad and everything we do is right. That just doesn't make sense. But you had made a comment about it seems to be win at all costs. Who cares what happens next year? I won now. And
Yeah.
I've seen that attitude on the left. I cannot
Yeah.
get any liberal that I know of to admit that. They will always say, no, of course we don't think that way. It's only the right. And when I talk to people on the right, they go, of course we don't think that way. It's only the left. So you have both
Yeah.
sides saying, burn all the crops, burn everything down. Who cares what happens next year? And then pointing at the other person and saying, I would never do that. But they're both doing it. And
Well, yeah, it's been interesting with the impeachment in particular because there are some, congressmen and senators tend to stick around for a long time. And so there's been some articles which have quoted, Democrats and Republicans and their flip of what happened 20 years ago with the Clinton impeachment.
Right.
You can almost flip their quotes, right?
right.
And the people who, the Democrats who were against the Clinton impeachment are now for the Trump impeachment and using almost the exact same language and flip it with the Republicans too, Everybody just reversed sides, right? Like, the Clinton thing, the Clinton impeachment. The Democrats said, well, this doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. It's not a big deal. And the Republicans are like, it's about the fundamental of the government, and we can't have people misbehaving in the White House. And you can flip those quotes between the two parties now 20 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. My side wins. Your side loses. Whatever it takes to win now. Who cares?
Yeah.
Well,
but they all claim this fundamentalism, right? But I mean, in the same Democrats and the same Republicans are saying that they're voting the way they're voting and supporting or not supporting the president because it's fundamental. If you look back 20 years ago, you can find instances where the exact same person on the opposite side, saying the exact opposite quote. It's amazing,
Yes, and it's pretty bad. Both sides are doing it. One of the things that grabbed me was, and again, because people in California where I live are going to hear this, I don't like Trump. I'm not supporting him. However, the Republicans and Trump were pushing this investigation into the FISA warrant. And if the Democrats and the FBI were politically biased when they launched the investigation, and they did the report, and the report concluded that there was no political bias at the start of the investigation. And I looked into it, and that seems to be true. However, after they start that investigation, it turns into the Benny Hill Comedy Hour with 17 different accidents, including language on key documents changed and rewritten. But I don't see any liberal news organization bring that up. It's just the report exonerated us. The investigation says it wasn't started politically biased. True. But there's clearly political bias after it starts. How come ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN don't bring up any of that when it's a fact, but Fox News does? But then Fox News does the opposite and says, oh, the report shows the whole thing's biased. Well, that's not true either.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what was very telling, of course, we for a long time we had this belief or idea that this, and some people even called it a fourth branch of government, that the media was supposed to be this other check, right? You have the executive branch of the president, you got the legislature with the House and the Senate, and you got the court, and there was kind of this idea that these outside parties, would be keeping an eye on everybody and holding everybody honest and ratting people out that did bad things. The media was supposed to have this kind of role. And, we've kind of had that for 200 years, and the theory, there's exceptions and all, but the theory is that these media people are supposed to be out there reporting the facts, telling people what's happening so that people know what's going on. And a very shocking thing happened in this election, which is, as Trump got closer and closer to winning the election. I don't think anybody thought he was actually going to win the election coming up to election night. But as he was running pretty good in the polls, and it looked like he might have a chance, a lot of the newspapers started coming out and saying, for the first time ever, we're not endorsing him, or we're against this candidate. And that was a break from tradition. And I remember scrolling between the news channels on election night, and seeing reporters actually crying or being visibly upset about the outcome.
Yeah.
And, that was the first time where I think people just openly broke ranks and said, hey, we do have an agenda here. We do want certain people to win. And now it's become very clear, right? You can categorize media outlets. Everybody goes into one column or the other. I don't know where you look for a media outlet that doesn't fit in one column or the other. Everybody pretty much knows which column the media outlet's in, and you can read the same story on two different media outlets, and you're going to get completely different accounts for it. And that's shocking. And as some people have pointed out, for the first time ever, we're now arguing about facts, right? We should be arguing about political differences, ideologies, different desires for what we want this country to do from a fundamental principle standpoint. And now we're spending a lot of time just trying to shore up what the facts are. Nobody knows what the facts are. And, I don't know how we got here, but it's an amazing place where, you don't trust what you read. You have to go back and then verify it, double verify it.
So let me ask you a controversial question. You don't have to answer, or you could give a poetic answer, perhaps citing Shakespeare.
Sure.
So you have this country for 200 years. People fought about policies, not just my party wins, whatever.
Yep.
And you have the news. And yeah, there's a liberal or conservative bias, but they'd at least admit when the other side had a point. And they don't do that at all anymore. And you have people going on TV like Maxine Waters, and I'm somewhat of a fan of hers, saying Trump is this and Trump is that, and then being asked by reporters, where your evidence? And she goes, well, I have no proof, but I'm going to keep saying it. And that's cool. No one calls her out. That's fine. And you have AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and as a Latino, I love the fact she's out there speaking, but I was shocked when she did the study. She said in an interview, if you're on the right side of history, don't have to have your facts right. You're on the right side of history. And again, not called out for by liberals. Now, obviously, Fox does a lot of fake news, but how do you have a functioning country where politicians say whatever they think and say, yeah, I don't have facts to back it up, that's just my opinion? They're not called out for it. And you have a court system that could be filled with ideologues for decades. Do you have a country that can function with all these pillars of democracy, the media, the courts, the politicians, just collapsing?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I worry about. I tend to be ahead of issues before they become issues, but I really worry about the long-term functioning of our country. And, I love the place. I mean, we've got great principles. The Founding Fathers did work very hard to come up with a compromise that held this country together for all this period of time. But nobody, I don't think anybody sitting in Philadelphia in 1776 envisioned that we would have this period where, people would tolerate people just not telling the truth, right? I mean, and you can point out both parties where they don't, where they don't tell the truth, and yet everybody kind of like, okay, well, that's par for the course. That's what we all do. How did that get to be okay? To just lie about the facts. Yeah, I disagree with you about how much taxes we should charge, and I disagree with you about, whether, the independent contractor rules, which is where we started this thing, is fair or right or whatever.
Sure.
We disagree.
Sure.
Okay, fine. But that's kind of where it was, is like we knew we would disagree. The House and the Senate were set up the way they were, knowing that would balance the power between the populous states and the less populous states. But I think everybody in 1776 probably thought that it wouldn't be okay to lie. And now we're at a point where everybody just looks the other direction like somebody lies, and that's what we all expect. All politicians lie, and not just shade the truth, not just promise something on the campaign trail that they never get pushed through, but affirmatively just tell non-facts or tell falsehoods. I mean, I don't think anybody envisioned that, and I don't think our Constitution was set up for the concept that people would just be outright liars.
What solution is there? I hear people talking about make new states, stack the Supreme Court, eliminate the Electoral College, make it where people don't get a guarantee to have 2 senators per state. Let's say we do all those things. Do we still have an America like we knew it? I mean, at some point, can you radically alter the Constitution so much and still expect it to be the same body politic?
Well, the founding fathers envisioned this. They said you could rewrite in the Constitutional Convention, right? They said you can call it convention and rewrite. You can do amendments, you can rewrite the darn thing. And, 250 years has been a long run. We're starting to have some real issues pop up. Does that happen in our lifetime? It's radical, it's extreme, but do we call it convention and actually rewrite the rules? Because, the current system seems to be having some problems. I mean, we've thankfully gotten our government shutdowns closed out fairly quickly, but they seem to be more and more frequent.
Yeah,
there's a debt crisis pending. There's an environmental crisis pending. There's a lot of stuff that just ain't being dealt with. The system was built to be deadlocked, and we are deadlocked, but we're deadlocked in more of an extreme way than I think anybody ever envisioned. And the problem with, changing the current system, jiggering with the Constitution, which I think is possible, is come in there and move some things around, is it changes the balance of power. So we're back to, the early 1800s where we're expanding west and we've got all these compromises, right? And if you look at that, the number of senators and the number of representatives has been a critical issue. I mean, that's where you get all your different compromises as the country expands west, where you have slave states and non-slave states, because they never wanted to give up the power, right? Nobody wanted to lose that balance of control, so there's always been this kind of thing of let's keep it balanced. We had 2 states at a time, one state that's going to be a slave state, one state's going to be a non-slave state. I don't think, all the people, and I like the idea of a popular vote for president, but, states with less population, they're not going for that because they know they're going to lose their powers.
Thank you. You are the first person I've heard say that. I have talked to many people about this. I have seen many politicians go, well, we'll just pass a vote to get rid of the Electoral College and change the way the Senate's formed. And I responded, so you're going to get 35 states to make themselves politically dead for the rest of time, like lose all the power they have and vote in a situation where they could be ignored.
Candy's not even going to show up in Iowa. They're not going to show up in Iowa. They're not going to show up in Delaware. They're just not even. They're just going to fly over the middle of the country, right? They're going to be up in New York, Florida, Texas, California, up the west coast into Oregon and Washington. They're going to go where the people are, Chicago, and that's it. You're going to say, okay, I can't waste my time flying to Nebraska. I'm not going to go out to, Wyoming or Denver. Denver's a fairly big city. Colorado's a very popular state, but it's not close to anything. So forget about it. We're just going to stick around this lower U, right? We're going to go up and down the East Coast and across the middle where we got a lot of people, and that's it.
So it's not a for sure conclusion that people in Tennessee will make themselves politically impotent forever and vote themselves out of a system that's given them some voice?
Yeah, they're not going to. I don't expect to. Well, even the founding fathers didn't think they would. That's why they put the Senate the way they did. I mean, they were small states and they were big states, and the small states wanted protection. They got the protection. Now people are saying, hey, small states, give up your protection. And I got to say, at the end of the day, the small states aren't going to act very hard to do that.
So last hypothetical question. Why are so many senators and professors and think tank people just saying, hey, we'll just, vote out the Electoral College and change the way the Senate works and bring back democracy? I don't hear any of those people talking about, boy, it's going to be hard to convince 35 states to basically neuter themselves. Why are politicians suggesting these things and not bringing that up at all? Why? Why is that happening? How come no one brings this up?
mean, I think it's just one of those things that sounds great on paper, and it sounds theoretically good until you get into the details of it. And you're right. You're asking them to give away the power. I mean, your small states become largely irrelevant, right? I mean, California with 40 million people, that's 15 different states. You'd have to have 20 different states get together to equal the population of California, depending on which state you picked, right? Um, they're not. Why would they give up all that power in the Senate? They're not going to voluntarily give that up. They're not going to voluntarily give it up in the presidential election, right? They're not. That's why D.C. doesn't have a senator. That's why Puerto Rico doesn't have a presidential vote, right? Because who's going to change nobody wants to change the balance of power, right? Everybody wants their balance, right? The more populous states, they want the popular vote, and the rural states are saying, hey, we want our protections in the Senate. We want the electoral college because we get more proportionally, per person, we get a more powerful vote. And the founders envisioned that, and it's still happening. It's just, some of the other stuff we've talked about today is the surprising part, kind of the fundamental understanding that underpins all this not working the way I think it was envisioned.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, and I want to say, is there any last-minute comments, statements, internet pages you want people to check out? How would you like people to get in touch with you, or is there things you want them to look into?
Yeah, no, I'd love to talk to people. You can find my Medium page, McBride for Biz. I talk about a lot of these different issues. I mean, the California thing, most of my stuff's about business, economics, politics, I think is very important, much more important than what we talk about. So, talk about politics, people. Get into discussions, have fundamental understandings, understand these issues, and I think hopefully maybe if we get enough people together, we can at least, we can't agree on what outcomes we want, but maybe we can at least agree on how we want the government run and some principles and understandings of, what real government ethics should look like. I mean, and so reach out to me. Find me on LinkedIn, R Shawn McBride. Drop me a message if there's something you're interested in. I'd love to hear about it. I would really like to think about the politics and business intersections, though. If that's a passion point, let's talk. What are you seeing out there? What's happening? But I think all of us need to be paying attention to what's going on. And technology is going to be interesting as it comes along, too, just as a parting idea, for folks to think about is technology's coming, it's changing things. We're talking about politics, overseeing our government. We're going to need to have a political process to oversee artificial intelligence, machine learning, a lot of this future technology. So we got to get this figured out because we've got another big thing coming, and we've got to come up with some way of putting ethics in AI, understanding what computers can and can't do, how we're going to police the actions of computers. That's the next thing around the corner, and I don't think we're ready for it, particularly when we're talking about some of the fundamental problems we're having today.
Andrew Yang's the only person that I've seen make a concerted effort to keep making people pay attention to those issues. Just going, you need to be looking at this. You need to be looking at this. Vote for me, don't vote for me. Pay attention to these issues. And I haven't heard anybody else pick those up and champion them. And I go, he's probably right. I think he's pointing at real issues.
AI will fundamentally change society. And we need to tell it what we want. And if we don't, then some computer programmers have a lot of power, and they're going to shape a lot of our future society. And that's not what I want to see. I want this to be a more democratic process. I want all of us to have input on what our future should look like.
Okay, well, you heard it there. R Shawn McBride, practicing lawyer in 1/5 of America, and his take on the legal tradition and the possible future for law in California. Thank you, and sir, and I will send you a copy of this interview very soon.
Great.
Okay, bye-bye. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, it was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.